welcome to the Millennial Book Junkie. Today I'm going to be comparing the Long Bright River book by Liz Moore to its series adaptation, Long Bright River, which just aired on Peacock on March 13th, 2025. So I notoriously do not like movie or series adaptations. I think the only one I can remember liking in recent history was It Ends With Us, but I usually like to preface like book versus movie / series comparisons with the fact that I always prefer the book, like 98% of the time. So anything that I talk about here kind of has that bias because it always just sounds better in the book. Everything is always better in the book. So before I even start in on this comparison, I just want you to know that I most likely will be favoring the book over the show, but still, let's talk about what was different. First of all, have you read this book? Long Bright River by Liz Moore. This, I'm not sure where this falls in her book writing. It might have been the book that came out before her big one, God of the Woods, which I also loved. Let me know in the comments if you read the book, or if you are just gonna watch the series. But other than that, let's get into it. So this book is a big book, and it is about two sisters, Mickey and Casey. And they are living in Philadelphia. They grew up with their grandmother because their mom had overdosed when they were very young. And their dad, I believe, was kind of in and out too. I think he was on drugs too, trying to get clean, but then also kind of relapsing. So he wasn't really around. So these two sisters grew up under their grandmother, who was not always nice. She was really stern. She was also very depressed that her daughter died at such a young age. Her daughter was the one who overdosed, the mother of her grandchildren. And we see in this book how Mickey, the older daughter, becomes a cop, and the younger daughter, Casey, unfortunately lives on what's called the Avenue, which they call it the Ave, and that I believe is a street in Philadelphia. I'm not sure. It could be in Kensington. I'm not sure if that was a city, but anyway, the Ave was where Casey ends up living. And she is on drugs, and she's working as a sex worker, and just kind of like, doing what she can, but struggling with addiction. So you have Mickey, the older sister, and then you have Casey, the younger sister, who is struggling, and Mickey, the cop, who is always worried about her sister, worried that she's gonna OD, and then of course, even when her sister is doing well, she's worried that she's gonna relapse. So there's always this constant worry about her sister. Well, early on in the book, there is a dead body that Mickey and her partner are called to look at, and Mickey immediately thinks it's her sister. It's not, but after that, there's a bunch of murders that keep happening on the Ave to women on the Ave, and Mickey is just really worried that her sister Casey is going to end up being one of them. So she hasn't seen Casey in weeks, and she's worried that something happened to her. So the book essentially is about her investigation into finding her sister. Mickey also has a son named Thomas, who is about 5 years old in the book, and he plays the role of obviously child, but he is a major factor, a huge part of Mickey's life, obviously. So she's kind of trying to balance looking for her sister Casey while also being a parent who is attentive and who is trying to raise a little boy into a really, self-sufficient, smart young man. So we see Mickey really playing the parent role and the cop role. So throughout this book, we're going back and forth between the present and the past, because we have the present, Mickey looking for Casey, and then in the past, we have their upbringing and what their relationship was like. Casey was kind of a wild child, always wanting to kind of go out and do things, see friends. She got experience earlier than Mickey, in terms of boys and drugs and drinking, from a young age. They were growing up under their grandma, so there wasn't like a lot of love going on there. Their grandmother was really hard on them in the book. And so throughout the book, we see, this relationship where the sisters are trying to be best friends, but Casey is kind of going off and wanting to do her own thing. And even from a young age, Mickey is worried about her sister. But her sister is a really good person at heart because she always stuck up for Mickey, when Mickey was getting bullied when they were younger. And she always kind of wanted to include Mickey, and she was always sticking up for Mickey. Mickey was kind of quiet, smart. She got made fun of for being smart. And so we see this dynamic between the sisters, and how they really relied on each other and they loved each other because they didn't have their parents. So that's the story of Long Bright River. I mean, that's like, if you read the book, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but essentially it's about Mickey trying to find her younger sister, Casey. And there's a lot of other murders, like I said, going on in the avenue. So we're like, where the heck is Casey? And is she murdered, And so Mickey's got to deal with a lot of drug dealers, and she's just trying to find her sister. So that is the book in a nutshell. And recently they came out with a series on Peacock to adapt to this book, Long Bright River, same name. And Liz Moore, the author, co-wrote the script for the show. And it looks like she executive produced it as well. And it seemed like she had a really big hand in the show. And I was really excited to watch the show because I finished the book a day before the show came out. I was really excited. And so when the show aired, it was 8 episodes and it was all at once, so you could just binge it. And I think if we took the show separate from the book, I would say it was a great show. It was really apparent that the show was sympathetic to people who are living on the streets and struggling with addiction, which I really liked, and sympathetic to people who have to live that lifestyle, which I really liked. But when I'm comparing the book to the show, there were a lot of differences, of course. And of course, I just want to preface this by saying, of course, there are differences. There's always differences. Shows and movies, this is a different medium, they've got different ways of telling story than books do. So I get that there's differences, but let's just highlight a few of them. Also, if you have not watched the show or read the book, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the differences in the characters, but I won't give away like any big spoilers, but I will talk about different character aspects that were different between the movie and the book. So the show, Mickey, is played by Amanda Seyfried, and her sister Casey is played by Ashley Cummings, and Mickey's partner, Truman Dawes, in the book, who kind of helps her look for Casey in the book, he is played by Nicholas Pinnock. Now, these actors did a great job, number one. I want to say that, like, I really thought, like, Amanda Seyfried is great. I really thought that the girl who played Casey, Ashley Cummings, was really convincing and really good. Like, she pretty much matched what I was thinking Casey was like in the book. And I thought they did really well. The key differences, I would say, between the book and the movie, Mickey's character in the book doesn't have an affinity for music. She does in the series. In the book, she's a little bit more quiet, and she likes to read. And I think the big thing in the book is that she wants to teach. She wants to be like a teacher. She has a teacher who she really, really likes. So in the series, there was no mention of that. I mean, there was some mention of it, but mostly they painted her as someone who loved to play music. And so that was one of the key things that first stood out to me. Another key thing was that in the book, the grandma, I called her Gee in my head. Maybe it was G because it was G-E-E, but I always called her Gee in my head. But G, the grandma in the book, was actually a grandpa in the show. And I was really upset by that because the grandma was such a good character in the book. Not that she did good things, but just her character felt very real and felt very authentic to me. And the way she treated those girls was very harsh, but you could see why she did it. She was hurting inside and she was struggling. She lost her daughter. And I just felt like G in the book was really well done. And while the grandpa in the series, you could tell was rough around the edges too, I just didn't connect with that character in the show as much as I did in the book. And that difference was a bit much for me. He like ran a casino or something, or he was like a bartender at a casino. And I don't know. I was just, the instant I found out that the grandma was actually grandpa on the show, I was kind of like, oh, I can't even start to connect with this. But I'm sure it was for a good reason, but I didn't really like that aspect of it. And then in the show as well, her partner is still also a very like key key role in the story. And in both the story in the book and in the show, Truman Dawes is his name, and he kind of helps Mickey look for the sister. And he, like in the show, has like a gambling problem, which I thought was interesting because in the book he was just like a really, really good guy. Obviously, like he might have been having some marital trouble, but he was a really good guy in the book. And I was like, did we really need to add the fact that he was flawed in the show? I don't know. So that was another big difference. And then also I noticed in the show that her son was a little bit older. He was about 8 years old in the show, where in the book he was 5. And I actually thought that was weird too, because in the show he just seemed very smart, and he was speaking like an adult, and I was just like, isn't he supposed to be like 5? Like, I get smart children, but like it was like unbelievable to me that he was that smart. But then later she said he was 8 in the show, so I was like, okay, they made him older in the show. That makes sense that he's a little more like conversational and grown up. So that at first kind of irked me. I was okay with her having like an affinity for music, but I think I'm any difference from my head, what goes on in my head with the book to the show, I'm always just like, huh? And then kind of like with the story. So obviously it's like it's a mystery, right? We're trying to find Casey. And the way it unfolds in the book is similar to the way it unfolds in the series. In the series, they kind of add on a few things, and they kind of almost like you're watching like a CSI episode or something like that. And so they add on some layers into the show, where I was like, I have no idea where this is going because that wasn't in the book. But for the most part, they stuck to the story, which was great. Like if I look at the two side by side from like a 30,000 foot perspective, yes, it's like the same story. But obviously nuts and bolts and things were a little bit different. And I think I could, for the most part, look beyond that. Everything is different when you make it into a show or a movie. Obviously they cut stuff and they rearrange stuff, and I think it was pretty well done. I didn't like the fact that Mickey and her partner Truman Dawes actually kind of had like a relationship in the show. That was like another big difference. They kind of like have this like relationship, whereas in the book they were not like that. And so I was like, I don't know why that needed to happen, but I guess you kind of needed to show that to show how much that he cared about Mickey. But yeah, so other than that, I mean, there was a lot of differences, but the storyline overall was the same. And I do feel like the actors who portrayed the characters, they did the best that they could given what was in the book, because I really did feel at times that Amanda Seyfried was Mickey. Like she was always kind of in her head, and she was like smart and kind of like quiet, but like always thinking ahead. I got that from Amanda. And then like the sister and how troubled she always looked and just kind of was sad, and I have a sister. So this book just like really made me cry, and the show made me cry at times too, because the moments that the sisters are bonding and you just see how much they care about each other. Like you see how badly Mickey cares about Casey and what the lengths she's willing to go to rescue her sister. And of course, there's things that happen in the book that, that she does, that Mickey does to help her sister, that her sister is like, no, you're horrible. Obviously there's conflict there. But really, Mickey is trying to protect Casey, like overall, like that's what it's about. Mickey is trying to protect Casey. But sometimes in the book, it comes off as, cruel. It's kind of like when your parent is trying to do something to protect you, but you're like, that doesn't seem right to me, So I did cry a little bit throughout a few scenes of the show, because I just felt touched by the relationships. and I could feel the pain of Mickey in the show, for how she was worried about her sister, just because I have a sister, and I'm also a big sister. So of course I resonated more with Mickey. And you're always trying to keep your little sister safe and happy. And that was something that really touched me. And so I that's probably why I cried in the book and the show. But overall, I have to say that the book was way better than the show, but the show was not bad. I think if on its own, I would have just watched it and been like, this is pretty good. It's like a good murder mystery, like you see this relationship between the two sisters. It's pretty cool. Cool in the sense that like Mickey is looking out for her sister. And I love a good like missing persons show. So that was like another thing that I really enjoyed about the series, because even though I read the book, I knew it was going to be different in the show. So I was like, oh, like kind of going along for the ride. Like, I don't know what they're going to say happened to Casey, because the show is going to be different than the book. But overall, I think that there was some really good emotional points in the show. But when I think about the show at random times of the day, I just kind of go, oh, the book was so much better. but I can appreciate the show for what it was and what it was trying to do. And like I said, if I had not read the book, I would probably just like be like, yeah, that was a pretty good show. But because I had read the book, I was just kind of like, yeah, the show was it was good in some elements, but just because the book was so much better that it's just so hard for me to give the show a glowing review. But I do think that they did the best they could on that show for what it was, because I really enjoyed the performances by the actors. I actually think they were very good, and I think they stayed true to the characters for the most part that were in the book. And the scenery was really good too. Like there was a lot of scenes from Philadelphia and like the Avenue, and it was really cool seeing like some of the art and the stuff on the streets, like the murals and stuff in the city was really cool to see. And I think they did a good job trying to portray what was happening in the book. But if you have not read the book, you need to get your hands on this book. I'm serious, because this was really good. Yes, Liz Moore can write long books, but I mean, they're easy to read, and I just kind of flew through. And there's actually a part in this book that's like, the lines are really like broken up. There's like a lot of gaps. Like she always kind of breaks up everything. And there's one page in here that is just like line, huge gap, line, huge gap, line. So you can kind of get through. I don't know. I mean, that was just a couple pages, but she kind of, has short chapters and stuff like that. So if you have not read any Liz Moore, like I highly recommend picking up this one. Like I like this one more than God of the Woods, to be honest. God of the Woods was great, but I really liked this one, probably just because I have a sister. But yeah, I really think it was very sympathetic to the people who work on the Ave, if there are real people that work on the Ave in Philadelphia. And yeah, I just really loved the book. So the show to me was not as good as the book, and that is my verdict. But that's usually the case, like I said, so nothing new there. But if you're never gonna read this book, I think the show is great. I mean, if you just watch the show on its own, like I said, so check out the show. It's on Peacock if you've got it, and check it out, or you could read the book and watch the show and let me know your thoughts. I would love to know as well. But yeah, those are my thoughts on comparing the book to the show. Let me know your thoughts. Like I said, if you have read the book or watched the show, let me know. And if you have not subscribed yet, I highly encourage you to do so. I just love meeting new bookish people out there. I know you all exist, so I love meeting you and talking to you in the comments. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.